Hi, my name is Sofia Sosa, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the U.S. microeconomic indicators and recession. And the main recession that I'm going to be talking to you guys about is the 2008 Great Recession. Some key terms that I'm going to be talking about throughout this presentation is the real GDP, and what that is, it's the total market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given year. It's pretty much to just adjust for inflation, providing a more accurate reflection of economic growth over time. Unemployment is the percentage of civilian labor force that is actively seeking a job but is unable to find one. It is a critical indicator of economic health and labor market conditions. And lastly, Consumer Price Index, the CPI, and that is to measure the cost of a standard basket of goods and services purchased by typical consumers based on a base year. It is used to measure inflation by tracking changes in the prices of goods and services. Right here, it's going to be um, a data graph from 1948 through to 2025. So this is a pretty up-to-date data on inflation, consumer prices for the United States, unemployment rate, and gross uh, domestic product. Apologies. And pretty much the main year that we're going to be looking at is right here. And you can see right here during 2028, 2028, I mean, 2006, 2007, you can see how it's going down, leading to the Great Recession of 2008. I don't know why I keep saying 2028. Some trends and patterns that I looking over through that data was that the GDP and CPI generally rise over time. Unemployment spikes during recessions, which the years were 1970, 1982, 2008, and 2020. The CPI inflation was at the highest in 1970, which was during the oil crisis, and it was at the lowest in 2008 and 2020. The GDP recovers before unemployment declines. Some questions that I will be answering throughout this presentation was what was unemployment in 2008 and 2025? In 2008, the U.S. unemployment rate, excuse me, averaged about 5.8% for the year. As of recently, ranging around mid-2025, the unemployment rate is about 4.1% and 4.3% as of June 2025, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. What are some trends and patterns that I noticed? Pretty much just repeating what I just talked about in the previous slide, was that over the long term, unemployment tends to rise during economic downturns and fall during the recovery process. What happens to unemployment and CPI during recession? During the recession, the unemployment typically rises because firms cut back on hiring and start to lay off workers as demand falls. The CPI during a recession will typically slow down because demand weakens, resources lack increase, and the prices pressures ease. What happens at the end of a recession? At the end of the recession, the real GDP stops contracting while the unemployment begins to fall. This is where employers wait until they are confident enough to begin rehiring. What are the relationships between real GDP, unemployment, and CPI? The relationship they have during the Great Recession is that the GDP falls while unemployment roses. Inflation stalled. During the recovery, the GDP rose and unemployment began to slowly decline, and eventually inflation began to slowly back up with delay. Okay, sorry, my throat was getting a little dry. But 2008 recession timeline pretty much goes into little details on pretty much what led up to the 2008 being one of the worst economic wise, and it all started in December 2007, and that's when housing prices started falling after peaking in 2006, and pretty much subprime mortgages defaults started rising sharply. And from January through March of 2008, that's when major investment banks reported large losses on mortgages, and that's what led to backed up securities. And Fed started cutting federal funds rates repeatedly. Bear Stearns, some of the major companies that started collapsing in March, and it acquired by JP Morgan Chase with federal assistance. And in the summer of 2008, that's when unemployment started to rise to 6%. Oil prices spiked above $140 per barrel. Economic growth stalls and consumers' confidence started to drop, which led to people pretty much not buying any goods or any services at all. And in 2008, it just goes into detail pretty much of all the companies that filed for bankruptcy and global credit market freezes, stock market plunges. Congress, that's when pretty much Congress started to step in to pass Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, which is the TARP program, which cost over $700 billion. By the end of 2008, the Fed reduces interest rate and launches emergency lending programs, pretty much what helped the economy pretty much helping it get back on its feet. By 2009, the Congress passes the ARRA, which pretty much was just a stimulus check kind of, which cost over $787 billion. The stock market hits lowest points in March, begins recovery. Housing markets and GDP show first signs of stabilization, and the NBER declares officially ended of the recession. So the recession of 2008 didn't really end until a year later in June of 2009. It's not letting me change to the next slide. So my presentation is going to look a little choppy because I have to it's not letting me record now together, but back to it, the monetary and fiscal policies. So pretty much emergency liquidity facilities like the PDCF, TAF, TALF, and the AIM, MLF, and others to restore market functioning, pretty much just programs and acts that helped restore the economic standing, and the quantitative easing was put into place to lower long-term rates and support financial conditions. Troubled assets relief programs, the TIRP, was put into place, which pretty much did a stabilization of banks and financial markets, which was authorized in October of 2008. The American Recovery and Reinvestive Act, the ARRA, is a fiscal stimulus passed in February of 2009, which provided tax cuts, spending on infrastructures, and aid to states to boost aggregated demand. So pretty much a little summary of what I just talked about was by the end of the recession, the GDP growth resumed in 2010. So it took over 2 years pretty much to restore the economic health of the United States, and unemployment declined gradually. By the end of 2010, the inflation stabilized. There was an act called Dodd-Frank Act that was created in 2010 to have stricter financial regulations, so something like what happened in 2008 would not happen again. And here are the resources that I used throughout the presentation. I appreciate you taking your time to view my presentation, and have a good one. Thank you.